Heath, and I'm head of trustees right now. I am a mother of two wonderful children and a wife to the very fabulous and handsome Roger Heath. So let me just share. Can you see things? Can you see people? Okay, good. All right, so I have my wonderful children. Katie Heath is at University of Alabama right now in tornadoes, like we just discussed. Jack is 14 and in the 8th grade, but he's 6'4", 260 pounds, and we're hoping for a lineman scholarship coming up. And then most of you met Elvis last spring. Just like Kate got a puppy, right now I got a puppy just right when COVID started. And then we have a great 9-year-old Great Dane that only tolerates the puppy. So we own a landscaping company, which is why I believe I was asked to talk about spring gardening. And so we've been landscaping for about 18 years. We do landscape installation. So I don't do a lot of maintenance, but I do know what it takes to keep things maintained. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you about today. When we plan for the season, goodness, I don't think I want to give you that. When you plan for the season, you want to try to start getting things ready. Now, today, there's absolutely nothing that we can do. It's mid-March. We have 2 feet of snow on the ground. So some of the things I'm going to talk to you about are things that you can do starting today that help throughout the rest of the season. One thing that I strongly recommend for anyone and everyone is to make a plan. And I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about with a plan. Now, this is done with a landscaping program, but you can always just get some colored pencils, go out, you measure, you talk about what you'd like to see, you scribble notes, you do everything on paper first, because it's a lot easier to make changes on paper than it is to dig another hole, move a big boulder, things like that. So this particular house just had a regular entry, and I did a quick plan for them for a walkway to the front, a little seating patio. It doesn't have to be that big or that grandiose. It could just simply be, we have junipers and we want to take them out. And then what do we do once they're out? So nothing has to be a big grandiose concept. When you're doing your plans, like I mentioned, you measure, you troubleshoot. When you take out the junipers, you've got all this area exposed. What do you do with that? You kind of go through all your different things, and you put together a wish list of what you'd like to see. Maybe you're not going to do it all this year. Maybe you do a little bit at a time, but you create your wish list so that you don't find yourself undoing something that you did the previous year. One thing that I will strongly recommend when you're talking about your plans is looking at your sun pattern. I get called all the time to come into an area that people say, oh yes, it's full sun, I get sun all day. Well, they're at work all day. They don't realize that their yard is in complete shade until they get home at 5 o'clock and the sun is coming in right in their face as it's setting to the west. And then really they're actually a full shade yard because they have less than 3 hours of sun. The rule of thumb is that shade is 3 to 4 hours of sun, which is usually late afternoon or early morning. Partial sun is that 4 to 6 hours, and full sun is 6 to 8 hours. And that is direct sun, not just getting you in the face in the morning or in the evening when you come home. So looking at the sun pattern will help when you're talking about your plantings or positioning of things, to make sure that you're not putting something that has different light needs than what you can actually provide. Choosing items to fit your space. So on this plan, I have these very specific plants, and it may look kind of full, but these are actually sized so that they grow into their space. One of the biggest things that I see people do is that they overload an area because things look really small when they first go in, and you end up having to hack things away because it's outgrown its space. You're trying to make something that wants to be 8 by 8 fit into a 3 by 3. And you can actually even see that in plantings that we had at the church that were just getting kind of hacked away and hacked away and hacked away, until finally I just said, we need to just pull these out because there's not any leaves left on them anymore, because we keep trying to make them fit into a space that they just don't want to. So when you're looking at a space and you say, oh, I love those hydrangeas that someone had in their yard. Well, if you have a south facing full sun yard and only space for 2 by 3, then you can't have the hydrangeas that someone had. You have to find something that fits in that space. All right, so getting a little organized now. I'm going to talk to you about the difference in plantings. We have, for flowers, we have annuals, perennials, and bulbs. Annuals are plants that you plant every year. And I hear so many people say, oh, I don't want to do that. I just want to plant it once and be done. The problem is that perennials, they do come back every year, but they only bloom for a very short period of time. At best, you're going to get 2 to 6 weeks. So when you are planning for a perennial garden, you want to make sure that you've got plenty of space so that when something is going out, you have something else coming in. So annuals will actually bloom all season long, from the time you plant them until first hard frost. And what that does when you're mixing those in together, or maybe you just have a pot or a planter with annuals, what that does is that gives you some consistency throughout the season. So these, for example, are all extremely vibrant colors. Anything that is intensely bright is generally going to be an annual, because a perennial cannot sustain that kind of color. So when we roll down here, these 4 plants right here are all perennials. This May night salvia will bloom the longest of everything I'm showing you at about 6 weeks. The daisies are about 2 weeks. The bleeding heart, if they don't get cold, frozen, then there may be a week to 2. And then the Asiatic lily, late summer, maybe a couple of weeks. So just relying on just perennials, you really have to, I guess, kind of know what you're doing or plan them very meticulously so that you have something going on at all times. This picture I have right here, it's actually kind of a hot mess, but it is an example of annuals and perennials mixed together so that you get that array of color and texture. Spring bulbs are actually planted in the fall. So I think it's kind of sad because we call them spring, but you have to plan way, way ahead of time. You generally plant spring bulbs in September, October, certainly before we get first frost. And they start blooming from April, which this grape muscali will bloom maybe even March. Then you get tulips that come in late April, early May, all the way to June. And so what you want to do is plan those when you have, so that you can have a staggering, because where we are right now in zone 5, we generally don't see a lot of perennial color until the beginning of May. So introducing the spring bulbs, again, plan for these in the fall, will help kind of wake everything up in our environment. Now, summer bulbs are a bit confusing. They're called bulbs. They're actually just rhizomes or tubers, root systems of plants that would typically be an annual in our environment. But it is a really inexpensive way to get this kind of vibrant color very cheaply. You can usually get the bulbs or tubers of summer bulbs on a pack of like 5 for the cost of what you can just buy one plant for that's already growing. And again, I'm a big proponent of using both and making sure that you mix them together. Now, I didn't do a slide for this, but there is a concept called xeriscaping. And a lot of people will come to me and say, do you do xeriscaping? And there's actually no such thing as xeriscaping. Everything that I'm showing you here and the things that I'm talking about are all based on xeriscaping principles, which is basically using the lay of the land to your advantage and planting like water need plants together. For example, if I have, no one's yard is ever flat. If we even took the church, for example, and our front lawn, that big, giant, expansive grass, we have high areas and we have low areas. So if I were to take out all that grass, which is not what xeriscaping is about. You're perfectly allowed to have grass, but what it's looking at is just conserving water where we can. And turf grass takes up a lot of water, as everyone who's on a committee knows our water bill is sky high in the summer. So, anyway, so it's using the lay of the land. So you take something that is a low water usage and you put it high ground. And then as you get the slope and as you get in that basin where we have that rock bed going through, which is actually serving to guide the water away from the building, we put things that need more water in lower areas. So when I go and I do a plan, I'll take a look at the lay of the land. And if I have an area that has a swale or where water typically collects, or it's where downspouts have run, then I'll put things that will actually absorb the water. Willows are a great example of that. Everybody knows willow trees, but there's actually quite a few willow shrubs that act just like a sponge. And what we do, instead of having extra runoff or changing things or dumping the water into your neighbor's yard, you actually use plantings to absorb that water so that everything gets taken care of naturally. That doesn't mean that we all have the water that everything needs. Xeriscaping does not mean that it takes care of itself, or if plants are considered xeric, they all need water to get established. To classify a plant as xeric, it needs less than 1/4 inch of water a week once it's established. So for that, you want to make sure that you have some sort of watering system in place. I know I've got plenty of clients that say they love to go out and in the evenings and water their plants. And I think that's wonderful. Get outside, take a look at what you've got going on. But the problem is, it's when you can't do that. And if you have a week or 2 weeks where you're not able to get out and hand water your plants, then you run the risk of losing what you have. So having a watering system in place is pretty important. Just like you have sprinklers for your grass, having what I call a drip system, or what we use is a drip system, where it takes water directly to the base of the plant. This is different than a soaker hose, which just kind of ekes out water as it goes. And then you're watering areas that may not have plants. So that's not as efficient use of space or of water. So anyway, that's your quick explanation of zero and xeriscaping. Please don't ever say xeriscaping at any time. All right, so getting vegetable gardens ready. That is something that people feel like middle of March, it's time to get ready. I grew up in Atlanta, so we actually planted everything on Good Friday. And the first year that I lived here, I went out and I bought my plants and planted on Good Friday. And Roger looked at me and he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, they wouldn't have sold the plants if they weren't ready to be planted. I've learned a lot since then. And so what I will say to you now is that it is too early to do anything with vegetable gardens, seeds, seedlings, get anything started right now, middle of March. You have at least another month before we're ready to start putting things into place with that. So I'm just going to show you what to start collecting. I use these Jiffy Pots. They're basically little peat moss. I even purchased mine. They're little peat moss pods that you can put your seed right in that little dot right there. And it comes in a tray, just like you see here. It's got a lid. So once you get everything in there, you put the lid on, it actually keeps the moisture in there. It's called self-watering. You do actually have to add water to it. But this is something that will help quite a bit in getting things going for whatever plants that you want to start from seed. We've been doing a vegetable garden for, gosh, probably 20 years now. And there are times where we've started everything from seed, and then there's times where the seeds just weren't working, and then we went out and bought plants. So I'm going to let you decide on, how you want to proceed. There's nothing wrong with buying the plant already started and planting those into the ground. You don't have to do everything by seed. I buy these little pots. I actually was saving some eggshells so I could try to do this very Pinteresty thing with we're using eggshells and putting the soil starter in there. But then we had a snow that I've got 4 feet drifts in my garden area where my soil is sitting. So I couldn't go get it. So now I will use my eggshells as compost, or it actually sharpens the blades on your disposal, if you didn't know that, which is what I usually use them for. So anyway, back to planning. You want to make sure that you have a plan on what you want to plant. I every year get so excited and I go and I buy 50 million packages of seeds, and I usually have 20 to 30 tomato plants because I want to try all the different ones. And every seed packet that you get comes with, I don't know, anywhere from 10 to 100 seeds, which you don't actually need all those. So when you go and you get all your seeds and you pick things out, take a buddy or put a plan together with a friend so that you can then pass on your seed packets that you don't use, because they generally don't last. They say they can last up to 10 years, but it's really disappointing when you've been holding onto some seeds for a while and you go to plant them and nothing happens because they're just too old. So put a plan together with friends, pass them on. I'll let you know what seeds that I have if you guys want to try any of them, because I always overbuy just because I get so excited while I'm there. So put a plan together of what you want to have. I actually have a list for you here of things that you can plant together or that you want to make sure that you keep separated, because it's very important. Sometimes things just don't react well together. They don't play well. So I've got things listed here so that you can see what you can and can't plant together. And then one thing that I always do and encourage others is add flowers into your vegetable planting areas, because what they do is they actually keep a lot of garden pests away. Marigolds, chrysanthemums, which are mums. They're also daisies are in that family. They probably are the #1 deterrent for pests, for all kinds of bugs. They have a very pungent smell, so rabbits will stay away. Same with marigolds. And then these lists of herbs, which you would normally have in an herb garden, keeping them separate. Go ahead and cross-check the list, of course, but make sure that you put some of these in and around your other plantings because they'll keep bugs at bay as well. And it just looks pretty when you have the flowers kind of mixed in. So one thing, if you don't take anything else away from what I'm talking about vegetables, is you only need one zucchini plant. And that will feed your family and probably the family next door. Our instinct is just to kind of, especially if we're grabbing plants, just to grab as many as we need. And you only need one, I promise you. Okay, we are in zone 5. And I'm sorry, this is sideways. I didn't mean for this to turn out this way. Actually, I think I have it in a different one. Let me see. Oh no, it turned sideways too. All right. So this is something that I would recommend asking me for, and I'll print it out for you. This actually gives you an idea of when to get things started. And so your cooler season plantings are up here: the kale, lettuce, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli. They're all going to be where you start them from seed. You can see there's only one that you were supposed to start in March. Everything else is kind of April on. And so this is when you would start the seedlings or anything in orange, then plant or transplant outdoors. So you'll see things like carrots, potatoes, corn, melon. Those things you don't do from seedling. You just plant them straight in the ground because they actually grow so fast that you can kind of mess up their schedule a little bit by trying to start them with seedling and then moving them outside. It's just better to direct plant. And then your harvest times are always going to be end of summer. Kale, I will tell you, I actually don't ever plant kale anymore. It just keeps growing. Same thing with collards, because I leave a little bit of the plant there and it stays throughout the winter because they're cold season vegetables. And collards are best if you actually collect them right after the first frost. It seems to take away a little bit of the bitterness. So there's a lot of vegetables here. I don't grow maybe 2/3 of these, but what I do try to do is add something new every year. So last year I added celery, and I made the best celery I've ever had in a Bloody Mary. And because it was really tough and I didn't pull it in time. So that was about all it was good for, was just to stick in a drink. But I know for this year, what to look out for. So my plan is for this year to start with broccoli, and that'll be my new vegetable. And that's really about it. I guess if there are any questions, because I've talked nonstop, please let me know.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Laura, especially about xeriscaping, right, Laura?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was paying attention. I heard you say that that's the most important thing we should be doing.
No, the most important thing is one zucchini plant.
I did hear that too. Okay, gardeners, questions. Donna.
I would just like to dispel another myth, and I think Laura probably would agree with this, that many people think that perennial plants are no care and they're easy. You plant them once and forget it. That's not true.
That is not true. You are absolutely right. And I actually had a little note here to even say something about that. So thank you. Yeah. perennials, they can outgrow their own space as well, not just from size, but they their root system actually has to be divided. So when you plant a perennial, it'll double in size the first year you have it, then double in size again, and double in size again. And then that's when it reaches kind of its pinnacle, is about 3 years. At year 4, year 5, you have to start looking at actually dividing that. Otherwise, it doesn't have enough root system to support the plant itself. So things like daylilies, very easy to divide. Iris are probably the best. You can literally have those just growing out of the ground. But Donna, you're absolutely right. You can't, there's nothing is maintenance free. So unless you live in a townhouse, I guess, with no yard.
So do you plant inside from seeds?
I do, actually. So just like that picture I showed, I get the Jiffy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, got all my seeds in there. So I do the Jiffy indoor greenhouse, is what
Yeah,
this is.
okay. Right, I did see
And
that.
they sell grow lights and heat maps and heat mats and things like that. I wouldn't recommend spending the money on that, even though they really kind of push it. One, because it will germinate so much faster than what we can keep up with our weather. You can't put anything in the ground outside until Mother's Day, till after Mother's Day, preferably end of the month, because we've all been hit with the Mother's Day 12-degree day. So, so anyway, I actually just set these up on our workbench in the garage. We have a grow light, but it's not even sitting close enough. So really it's just basically a fluorescent shop light that's out there.
So you just use that fluorescent light for the plants?
Yep. And it's a matter what the light does more than provide light, is that it's creating the beginning of that photosynthesis process from the plants with the plastic cover on it. So they're called self-watering, but what you do is you put the water in the base and it makes these blow up. And then you put this plastic lid on the top, and that actually holds the moisture in, and you leave that on until you start to see the seedlings. There was one year where I just left it on to see what they would do, and the plants are getting so big, they're pushing it off. But what that ended up doing was put more stress on the little seedlings themselves. So as soon as you start to see those pop up, you take the lid off and leave it off. Now, it's in my garage, so things fluctuate. So I did, when we would have cold, like teens, and these were out there, I would actually put the lids back on and then throw a blanket over them just for some insulation. But I didn't haul everything inside or anything like that because they're fine.
So is your fluorescent pretty bright, like sunlight, or is it dimmer
Nope,
than that?
it's just a work light.
It's on the ceiling and you're on the workbench.
Right. No, it sits, I would say it probably, to actually function as a grow light, it needs to sit just mere inches above the plastic lid. Ours sits, so the workbench sits maybe 24, 30 inches above. So it really does not, in effect, work as a grow light. Gosh, remember when violets used to be such a big deal? I don't know. Everyone's grandmother I knew was growing violets on her desk, and they had always had these lights just barely sitting right over them. So that's a grow light. The fluorescent lights are just natural light, isn't quite enough, but you'll get what you need just based on the moisture and the heat that's generated inside that plastic.
Thank you.
Well, yes, Donna.
Would you comment a little bit about best time for planting trees or shrubs?
Yes. Actually, perennials, trees, and shrubs, there's the best time, and then there is our window in Colorado. The best time to put anything in the ground, perennials, shrubs, trees, is going to be fall. And that is September, October, early November, depending on snowpack. I plant until generally my planting schedule ends Halloween, October 31st, and that's weather dependent. And for the most part, I've been able to do that because up until right now, we really haven't had a tremendous amount of snow. And up until this year, the ground hadn't been frozen in years, truly frozen. And so the reason why fall is the best time is because it's done with its growing, blooming, reaching out and developing stage, and it's looking to gather nutrients and go dormant. And so when you plant in the fall, its root growth is astronomical compared to the rest of the time period. It just moves so much faster. So it's gathering nutrients, it goes dormant, and then it wakes up to grow in its new environment. Our window here, though, in Colorado is, like I said, Mother's Day to Halloween. And you almost do things, or at least us as a company, I can't hold everything till the fall. So what we try to do is make sure that if I have a window, 2-week window, 3-week window, whatever, where we have 100-degree temperatures or anything really above about 90, 93, I try to hold off on planting because it puts too much stress on the plant itself, whether it's a perennial tree or shrub. It goes through a shock of moving from this most perfect and wonderful environment of the nursery, where it's getting watered every day, it's getting turned, into going into a new environment with a shock to the nutrients and soils and salts that are in the ground now. If you're not planting on a berm and you're actually digging a hole and there's clay, which we either have clay or sand, there's no good soil here. So when you plant in clay, you end up with almost a bathtub where you can literally drown the plants because there's no place for the water to go, or sand where it moves too far away. So you have to do good soil amendment. Fall is the best time. Try not to plant in high heat. Snow is actually not that big of a deal. Snow is insulating, so things are actually warmer under the ground than they are above the ground when you have heavy snows like we have now.
Got lots of questions.
So I never worry about snow. It's always just the high temperatures, or you never want to move that root ball in, freezing negative temperatures, because that air will actually freeze the root system.
Stacy, do you have a question? And I'll go Stacy, then Charlie.
Sure. Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much, Laura. This is so interesting. I had a two-parter, and I'm sure Charlie won't mind. You hear a lot about like our soil here in Colorado, and like, is that a real thing, or is that just to get me to buy more topsoil or a special kind of soil? And then number two, is it better to use wood chips in our planting areas or rocks? Heard both ways. And then back to the seeds, if it's free, it's for me. So I would like to get in on the free Heath seeds.
Are you going to plant them?
I feel like this should be a safe space, and maybe I will sell them.
We need some for our craft on Sunday.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, I have the prettiest seeds for that. Yes.
I'm just kidding. She
Okay.
Really does want seeds.
All right. So the soil, yes, that is a real thing. Like I was saying, we have either clay soil or sandy soil, or very depleted soils, like in the Denver area, like downtown Old Homes area. So the clay is actually bentonite. And what it does, like making a clay pot that holds water. The clay does the exact same thing. The bentonite will expand and contract. Actually, it's the water that's in the soil that will expand and contract that's caught in between pieces of the clay. So like in the winter, water expands when it freezes. And so if you have heavy bentonite, you'll actually see your driveway or your sidewalk or maybe your house actually move up and down based on the seasons. So as the water gets in and it freezes and expands, it pushes the clay soils up or out. And so you'll get a lot of movement. It's difficult to get a good compaction on clay soil if you're installing new surfaces, new concrete, patios, pavers, anything like that. You want to make sure that you're getting a good compaction. And with clay, you can't do that because it moves. So you have to excavate and excavate and excavate until you can get to a point where you're either not hitting a section of bentonite, or you've excavated enough that you can put in something that's a solid base, like a recycled concrete or a road base. The sand, you would think it'd be great because it's not holding onto that water, except for the water just dissipates. So if you have too sandy of soil, which Aurora has a lot of sand, then nothing holds onto water. So what you do with soil amendment, it's not topsoil. Topsoil is crap soil. Sorry, Paul. So topsoil has no nutrients. It's usually full of rock, clumps of generally not clay, but it's just not good soil. What you want if you're doing soil amendment is either it's called a biocomp or a planter's mix. A biocomp is generally a little bit more organic. You can certainly smell the difference in it. It's not quite solid manure, but it's close. Planter's mix is a mix of topsoil, mulches, and a biocomp. So it's not quite as, the term is hot or too organic that it would actually putting too many nutrients on the roots of the plant and actually burn it up. So biocomp or planter's mix is what you would get. And then what was your next question? Oh, wood chips or rock. So either one of those are perfectly fine. It's a personal preference. As a designer, I look at things like drainage. I want to make sure that I always have positive drainage away from someone's foundation, and rock on top of landscape fabric will actually help dispel water. It won't hold on to it. With the mulches, there's actually several different kinds of mulches. What we see a lot is a dyed mulch. When you see the bright red or the very solid brown or the yellow, those are dyed mulches. And what they are is they're actually recycled pallets that have had a wonderful new life. But the dye keeps them from absorbing water. And so what happens is when you get a gully washer rain, they just kind of float away because they're not absorbing the water. They're staying on top of it. You can actually even take new mulch and put it in water and it'll just float. And you'll see the dyes or the water just kind of beating up on the dyed mulch itself. So what I typically recommend is a shredded cedar mulch. And what that does is it mats together so that you get a good coverage. It's natural. It's going to gray out just like your fence does, but it will stay in place, and it's something that's easier to maintain. The dyed mulches are great in a commercial environment where somebody is coming through there every single week to brush things back, turn the mulch, because they'll actually create mold and fungus if they get too deep, because again, they're not absorbing the water. They're just sitting on top. Rock is great. People think that I'll do rock because it's lower maintenance than mulch, because mulch you do have to replenish, as it breaks down. It breaks down, if you use a natural mulch, it's going to break down into a soil. So about every 10, 15 years when people have a mulch bed, I recommend that they pull the fabric out from underneath, because it's just built up soil for 15 years as that mulch is broken down, and then start over again. But it's not every year, that's in every 15 years. So when people say that they want to do rock instead of mulch because it's lower maintenance, that is actually not true. Because what happens is you have your fabric, you have 2 to 3 inches. 3 inches is ideal depth of rock. And then you have weed seeds and soil and all these things kind of blow in on top. And the rock, with it being holding heat, will actually give it a wonderful place to purchase and grow. So you end up with weeds on top of rocks. And what I recommend people do is, when we have beautiful 70-degree days in March and April, and you can't put anything in the ground, to actually go out there and wash your rocks. Not soap or anything like that. Just take a hose, and really, if you have a power washer, power wash your rock mulch areas to get those weed seeds and that dirt that's blown in on top over the winter out. And that will cut down about 80% of your weed propagation every year, just by cleaning that out, the weeds that grow in on top of the rocks. But pulling weeds from rocks is miserable. It is the least fun thing ever. But if you keep your mulch at 3 inches, you keep your rocks washed every year, you won't have that issue. And yes, you can have seeds, Stacy.
Charlie.
Do you use any fertilizers?
I do. I love fertilizers. I go all organic. And so for our grass, I do have chickens that walk around and fertilize it all the time and kind of loosen it up. But I'm a huge fan, as a professional, of the Richlawn products, or anything that's made by Echo. So Revive is a great soil conditioner, and it loosens up our clay-like soils so that water can get deeper. And then the Richlawn actually has a spring, summer, fall, and winterizer fertilizing sets. And then as far as plantings go, I don't actually stick organic on that all the time. On my annuals, I do like Miracle Grow's Bloom Booster. But in my vegetable gardens, I stick with bone meal and blood meal, and put those down at the base of the plants. Again, that helps with pests, but it also really provides a lot of direct nitrogen and iron to the plants themselves. Yes.
Carol.
What do you recommend to deter deer and rabbits?
So there are plants that deer and rabbits don't like. They don't always know that they don't like them. So deterring baby deer or baby rabbits is a difficult thing, because they need to learn what they're not supposed to eat. I will say that blood meal actually works really well because it has kind of a pungent smell. It's a blood product. And that has been my #1 deterrent for deer. And for rabbits, I actually plant in my vegetable gardens. Now I have raised beds, so they're a little higher than what rabbits can get to. But if I have plants in my yard that rabbits like, I plant chrysanthemums and marigolds around those to try to keep them away. Now, I've also sat and watched them eat the marigolds. So there's nothing that is fail safe. For your grass, there are products that you can put as a systemic with your fertilizer. It's called a critter ritter. And what you do is you just apply it with your fertilizer in a liquid form. And that takes a little time, but it actually works from the root base up, that it will make it so it's not tasty to them. And I've had good success with that as well.
How about the deer sprays?
They work fantastic. I mean, they really do work well. The problem is that you have to keep applying them. Liquid fence is fantastic, but if it rains or snows or the wind blows too hard, then you have to go out and reapply.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Charlie?
Yes, Charlie.
The snow has brutalized my mugo pines. Can I just cut those suckers back or try to repair them as best I can? Or should I wait to the fall to do that?
Repair them as best you can. The weight of the snow, because it was a really heavy, wet snow, probably broke a lot of the branches. And so try to repair those if you can. You can use the like pruning tapes and try to actually split them back together. We did that with a locust in our yard. The snow literally split it down the middle, and it was Katie's tree. So we actually bolted it back together, and now the tree has grown around the bolts. And so, but you can fix things, and I would do it sooner rather than later. With any type of conifer evergreen, meaning it has needles. It doesn't grow growth on the inside of the plant. As your branches grow out and as you have the needles grow out, the lack of light and the acidity of its own needles will kill the inside of the plant. So it's if you look at it where it's broken on the inside of the plant, there's no needles, unless it's a spruce. They're the only ones that actually have needles back into the plant. But the pines themselves, they're really only on the ends, or 2 or 3 inches, or whatever it is the growth pattern is. So what you want to do, if you were to cut that out, you're just going to end up with a hole. It's really not going to, especially if it's a really old plant, it's not going to fill itself back in. So patch and repair like as soon as you can get to the plant itself. Sorry, Charlie. Wish I had better news for you.
The snow's beautiful, but it sure makes a mess.
Oh, I know. We lost a pretty big branch on a tree. And it's just simply because I didn't want to go and knock the snow off of it. It's all my fault. It's just no fun to knock the snow off because you end up with it all over you.
Anybody else? Any questions?
I also have some fire bushes, that's what I call them. They're dark green in the spring and summer, and then they turn bright red in the fall, but they've just grown huge. Can I trim those back severely or just leave them alone?
No, you can't. You can't trim them back. And that's what I was talking about finding the plant that fits the space. So what you have is called a burning bush. So you're close. The leaves come in almost lime green in the spring, and they get darker and darker, and then it starts to turn that unbelievable red, like the Stacy's wall, in the late summer and early fall. There are actually there's several varieties, but there's the burning bush, and then there's the dwarf burning bush. The standard burning bush wants to be 10 by 10. The dwarf wants to be 5 by 5. And so I really see more of the dwarf than anything, but 5 by 5, when you have a space that you can only have 3 by 3, seems really big. On any plant, you can't, on most plants, you can't actually let it grow and grow and grow and then try to hack it back. You need to stay on top of it if you're basically going to bonsai its growth or stunt its growth. Now, there's an exception to that, and that is lilacs. Lilacs, you can literally cut straight down to the ground As long as you leave that, what's called the bud union, it's where it actually comes out of the ground and then starts to form its branches. You can cut a lilac all the way back and it will just grow back. It's the phoenix of shrubs. And that will allow you to control the size. But on your burning bush, you would have to cut it back pretty slowly, because everywhere you cut is where you get new growth. But you cut back so far and you don't have those growth stems left, and you're just left with a really kind of sticky shrub with no leaves. Sorry.
Do you water new perennials and trees through the winter, or do you just let them go?
Everything needs additional water because we live in such an arid climate. And my rule of thumb is what I give instructions for is that in the winter, outside of when your sprinklers are running, any day that's over 40 degrees and there's no snowpack. So right now, our snow has covered us for a month. We don't have to have any watering because there's enough. But like last November, I don't actually think it snowed. So that would be a time once a month, any day over 40 degrees, and there's no snowpack. Now snowpack, it can sit there and it kind of gets stuck sometimes if it's been there for a while. So I don't know if any of you've ever experienced getting snow mold, where the snow sits there for so long that it actually kills the grass underneath, or voles get in and do their own business as they work under the snowpack. But if we have snow that sat for quite a while, which we may on this particular storm, what you want to do is go through and poke holes like with a broom handle or something like that into that snowpack so that air can get in, and it'll actually help melt the snow from underneath. But in the winter, it just really depends, Clyde, on what kind of moisture we've had. I always water, but I have the ability to blow out my own sprinklers. So if we've had, a couple of months where we really had no moisture and it's warm, then we'll water everything. But perennials, trees, and shrubs, especially newly planted ones, really could benefit from a drink.
I did water we planted Gamble oaks likely in the summer last year, and I did water them, although once I watered them and it was above 40 degrees and the surface was okay, but it actually had frozen below that. And I think based on what I saw the water doing, there was probably frozen ground underneath it. Is that okay, or would you not?
It's fine. This year we actually had a true hard freeze in a way that we probably haven't had in at least 10 years. Normally we only get maybe 3-4 inches of freeze, maybe 6 inches, but we are seeing a freeze line like 2 and 3 feet right now, which hasn't happened in a long time. So most of you probably have experienced that your downspouts are getting stuck, or you're getting ice dams in ways that you haven't in the past, because the water actually isn't able to get into the ground. So you did the right thing by watering, and oaks need a ton of water. So it was good that you watered. It probably was frozen, but that means that tree was dormant as it is. And you're going to be fine. Just make sure that this spring, before you turn your sprinklers on, that it's getting water like in April, because that's when things are really going to start to pop. Those will pop a little later, but watering in the winter is always good. Don't ever second guess that.
Okay. Well, I hope they work. Some of them are memorial oaks, so we really want to keep them alive.
Yeah, no, they're resilient. Unbelievably resilient. So you're good. Yes.
Laura, we have some hydroponic tulips. Can we plant those outdoors?
yes, but it depends on which variety of tulip that you have, because there are early season versus late season varieties. And you want to be able to put it outside in May. You can't do it before then. Does that make sense? So being hydroponically grown, it's in its own microclimate as it is. So to be able to move it outside, it just needs to be a late season tulip. Is it blooming now? Yeah, then you can't.
Can we like save them somehow? Or
Yes, you can. So once it's done blooming, and this is with all bulbs, you want to wait until you can pull out the leaves by hand. So the flower is gone, you're just left with this ugly stem and then these old yellow floppy leaves. And when you can pull them out by hand and they pull away from the bulb, that's when they're done. They've gathered all the nutrients they need to be able to bloom next year. So when it is old and yellow, then, and the leaves fall off, then what you want to do is take it, wrap it up in newspaper, and then put it in either a very dark, cool place, or even a refrigerator back in the back, something like that, if you have that extra space, and then pull it out in the fall. But you can't plant it this season if it's already blooming.
but we can in this fall, right?
Absolutely. Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Donna.
Have you seen or had any experience in replanting the amaryllis bulbs that come, they call it, the one that's coated in wax and it pops up and blooms and you don't water it? And have you had any luck planting those afterwards to have them come back another year?
So those are a winter bloomer,
Yes.
and they typically are not planted outside. Certainly not in our environment because it's too cold.
No, I mean in a potted.
Oh yeah,
container.
Absolutely in a pot. Yes, that's no problem at all.
And you've had them actually bloom again?
I have only done that with the narcissus, not
Okay.
the amaryllis.
Okay.
I've
not had any luck, so that's why I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, I think that it may be almost like an orchid bulb where it doesn't need soil. It needs good drainage because you're not planting it when it's blooming. It's not in any soil. It's just in water and rocks.
Right.
So planting it in a pot, you may want to, if you want to try it again, I would try an orchid pot. And orchid soil actually isn't soil. It's just bark that just covers it. So I would try that.
Just to let you know, my mother has grown them so many that we had like 10 of them because she'd get one every year and she just kept them growing.
How does she do it?
She just waters them.
Oh, so she leaves them just like they are.
Yeah, she puts them away and then brings them back out and starts watering them again.
Okay.
She gave me one that had 16 blooms on it.
Oh, how beautiful.
It was gorgeous. Yeah, but she has kept them for years. Yeah.
Laura, another question on deer resistance. Is there a difference between, say, sumac and the burning bush that Charlie mentioned in terms of deer resistance, or are they about the same, just need to be treated the same in terms of warding the deer off?
It depends on what type of sumac you have. So there are plants that are definitely considered more deer resistant than others. The staghorn sumac is not deer resistant. They love that. The low grow fragrant sumac is something that they don't eat. And then to be honest, I don't know that burning bush is considered deer resistant. I would actually have to look that up. I've got my book somewhere, but there are some plants and there are some that would surprise you, like quince, flowering quince, which is, the quince fruit. Deer don't eat, largely because it's got giant thorns. And so But if they can get a hold of that fruit, then they will, they just won't eat the plant. A good rule of thumb is if it has thorns or it is a high pollinator, things like sages or spireas that really get a lot of bees, they don't eat, they stay away from. So it's something that it just depends on the plant. But if you're talking about the staghorn sumac or cut leaf sumac or any of the ones that are really beautiful in the fall, I call them the poor man's Japanese maple, then deer love them and will eat them any chance they get.
We tried those.
Ate them right down to sticks.
Yeah, they do.
I have a question. Do you have a favorite place you buy plants and shrubs? I mean, Home Depot, Lowe's, or do you go to a nursery that you like?
So me doing what I do, I buy almost everything from a wholesale nursery. It's Alameda Wholesale Nursery. I will tell you though, there's only about 3 or 4 growers that all plants in Colorado come from. So Monrovia, Proven, there's a few others, but all the plants that I buy come from the same place that Home Depot gets their plants. And they would be identical, except for the fact that plants are shipped dry. And because it all boils down to weight. And so you can get more plants in if they're dry than you can if they're wet. And so the difference is that at Home Depot or Lowe's, these pots from Monrovia come in and then they sit in the parking lot for a day or 2 days because they don't have enough people to offload them. I know this because I used to work in the garden department at Home Depot. But at my nursery, they have someone who takes them off the truck, puts them in their spot, waters them right away. So I will say that from a price perspective, I could buy them cheaper at Home Depot, but I don't have confidence in how that plant will do. Now I know that there's a guarantee or whatever, but chasing down that pot and that receipt, to go do that isn't worth it. So knowing that the plant is a little bit healthier. That being said, when you go to some of the nicer, smaller, independent nurseries, things like even O'Toole's or Wilmore or Tagawa, their plants seem really expensive. You could probably buy 3 at Home Depot for what you pay for one little tiny plant at Tagawa. But that plant at Tagawa is taken care of. And so you're putting a better product in the ground. For my nursery just has what it has. So occasionally I have to go elsewhere. And sometimes, being a professional doesn't get me anything but the handshake. So I just bite the bullet and I pay more for the plant because it's better. But I still get sucked in at Home Depot and buy, 5 for $10 and then plant them in my own yard. So.
Bulk I sometimes use bulk composites and those mulches. Where do you buy that kind of thing from?
Pioneer Sand, usually.
Pioneer?
Yeah, and largely because they have so many locations. Everyone is fairly competitive with everyone else. Pricing is generally the same. I do have my favorite rock yards that I go to, but they're not anywhere close to here. And being a professional, I can just call them and say, hey, set up a delivery. My favorite is Bedrock. And there's one located at 52nd and Sheridan and another in Brighton. It's not worth the freight coming from Brighton to get anything, but it's a small company. He's got a beautiful yard. He always has anything I need or we'll get it. But for the basics and mulch or rock, Pioneer is is a good go-to. They always have coupons and value packs for 10% off or a discount on delivery or free delivery or things like that. So, and they've been purchased by another larger company out of California. So they've made a lot of changes to their locations and are much more retail friendly than they used to be.
Do you ever use Silver Crown?
I love Silver Crown. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They've continually given us better deals than other people. I mean, they've given us quotes and sometimes delivered for less than their price, which was really nice. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, super, very nice. I think they're family owned. Very, very nice people. And they, yeah, we buy stuff from them frequently, but they are also right down the street from Pioneer, which all the ladies at the desk know Roger. And so it's a benefit for him to go where he's known and appreciated, unlike home.
All right, anybody else? Laura, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are a wealth of knowledge.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for doing that. So